thought, so I'll let you finish your thought. You were saying.
So one of the things I wanted to make sure that I talked about today was something I read in the Post-Dispatch about the House Speaker's statement that he was a proponent of not changing the transfer law and that it's working fine. Kids are now getting a quality education. And so I really want to figure out a way to to fuse him of that thought, right? That belief, because the children who are leaving and who actually go to that district, maybe they're getting a better education, great. But what about the 76% that stay in the district, right? And now you have so many fewer dollars to educate those kids. And so that has to, somehow we have to get in front of people who say this is a great law and convince them that it's great for a few, but it's not great for the vast majority.
I appreciate you, talking about Speaker Jones's comments, because he's made no secret of the fact he's a very serious school reformer, and he's made lots of efforts to change public school education as we know it, and he's been completely shut out. So his efforts to introduce things like vouchers and charters and things like that have not been successful. So, but it's good that you mentioned that, because that reflects the political realities of what we're about to do in these next 15 weeks. There's a sense from serious reformer that says, look, if you don't want to do my reforms, then I'll leave it the way it is. And that's just the political reality. I don't necessarily disagree with the things you're saying and some of the other things that we've said tonight about is that a good perspective to have or a bad perspective to have. But with respect to the politics of what's going to happen the next 15 weeks, that's the reality. The reality is that we're going to have to come up with a compromise solution that does a little bit for everybody, that helps the districts that are losing kids deal with that, helps the receiving districts that are having to deal with that, but at the same time doesn't eliminate the opportunities for choice that some reformers think are a really important part of intermediate long-term success in public school education. So that's an interesting thing you mentioned that quote, because that is the political dynamic that we find ourselves with for these next 15 weeks.
It's called a bargaining message. That's what it's called.
We shouldn't bargain when it comes to kids, though.
Oh,
That's the
I
problem.
absolutely agree.
We should,
I absolutely
and
agree.
some of the bargaining that we get talking about are about methods that have nothing to do with helping impoverished districts. Vouchers do nothing to help impoverished districts. And those are the things that we get criticized as educators for not being willing to bargain, because kids are played as pawns and they're put in the middle for commercial interest instead of educational interest. And we're always forced to play defense because we're considered, oh, well, nobody will agree with that. We're willing to do anything that's good for all kids, not a certain segment of kids, all kids.
And that's a good articulation of that position. I appreciate that very much. I guess I'm not an education expert. So many of you at this table are today, and your experience has been in that field. What I'm referring to is just the political dynamics. And the political dynamics are what they are. If nothing passes, Missouri's in a very interesting place as far as making laws concerned. It's very difficult to pass a law. We have a very strong filibuster in the Senate, so it's difficult. And so we either do nothing, which I don't think is what we should do. We have to come up with a solution. But the solution cannot be one-sided. It's going to have to be a compromise where people like Speaker Jones have a really strong sense of reform. They're going to have something in the outcome that they can look to as reform. And I think a lot of the ideas we've heard today and some of the other bills that have been put forward, there's going to have to be things in it to satisfy that concern too.
I have a major concern, and that's with social promotions. And maybe someone around the table can answer this question. Why is it that we're letting kids pass from one grade to the next, knowing that they're not equipped? I mean, they're not equipped in the areas of math and science, communication arts, and we know it. We know that they're not ready to go to the next level, and we tend to just pass them on, and eventually they drop out because they cannot compete. So if we're not educating them, we're going to incarcerate them. What are we going to do as a collective to deal with social promotions? I think that we need to have that discussion because it's bad. It's bad.
I think one of the most powerful things we can do is decide that collectively, and I think this is what's important about issues, efforts like American Graduate, like Ready by 21, is to say that as a community, what's our collective vision for that child? If we really expect that child to be an informed, actualized citizen, What are the things that need to happen along the way? And that's the problem with a lot of the education reform. It basically says, can they fill in the proper amount of bubbles in time? As opposed to saying, can they form and construct knowledge? Can they make connections between science and social studies and math? You see, this is the silly thing about math that has always irritated me. When you get beyond arithmetic, right, math was formed as a language for science and to understand, but yet we teach math as if it's about filling bubbles, as opposed to empowering people to understand innovation. So you have to change the way that you look at that, and that's the issue when we look at so-called efforts to say, this is how we want to fix schools in Kansas City. My question is this. First of all, education is a developmental process, fact. That's not conjecture. The other thing is this. How do we help children and communities create processes for constructing meaningful knowledge so when people leave those doors, they're powerful? They're self-actualized. They can think. They can understand opportunity. What we have done is we have said, can you check the bubbles?
Well, they can't even read.
Right.
I mean, you have many of them that are coming out, they're going straight into remedial courses when they go to college.
Right.
Look, all of the skills that they should have received in middle school and high school, they're now circling back around. Over 80% of the guys and women that are incarcerated are illiterate in the state of Missouri. So we have a very serious problem with how we're educating our kids, and we're not.
Those problems, the solution to those problems don't require legislation. I mean, I think you spoke very eloquently as to how education, the outcomes, what they should be, but we don't need to pass laws to have education be that. That's how education should have been, that's how education should be going forward. I mean, what's at issue today with respect to changing laws is this operational issue of these student transfers and how we're going to reconcile that. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and Senator Sheehan, I totally agree. How can it be that 25% of the kids that enroll at University of Missouri at Columbia, which takes a 24 in the ACT to attend, 25% of them will attend a remedial math or remedial reading course. That's at the University of Missouri with a 24 ACT. So, but that's not for today, that's not for the next 15 weeks, and that's not for changing laws. That's for changing how, quite frankly, most of you at the table are in professional education. You don't need us to change laws for you to fix education.